Well, hello there. Happy Thursday to you. I'm so glad you're ready for some drawing time. I hope you had a wonderful day. I hope you have some pencils ready to go, and I do hope you're ready for some wildlife because that's what I have queued up for you today. And awesome. Okay, I see that I'm live, so that's always a good sign. So let me just gather my thoughts. I was kind of rushing off camera to grab some sketchbooks because I wanted to share some pictures with you before we dive into the drawings. So I just have to gather my train of thought. But as I said, I have wildlife for you, and that wildlife is deer. So with that, I have a really fun lesson, something that we haven't done yet, and it's going to be really, really cool. So if you're here and you've been here with me a long time, so glad you're ready for yet another session. And if you're stumbling across this video later on as a recording and this is your first time, welcome. My name is Carolyn, and I am the owner of Cura Studios, where I teach classical drawing skills to artists like you so they can build a really solid footing to explore their creative voice from. And with that, every Thursday, we come here together to draw for an hour, and these sketch sessions are designed to be the perfect combination between a workout for artists and a play session for artists. And you can choose which end of the extreme you need more of when you find the session. Do you really want to work hard and break a sweat by trying out what I'm instructing? Or do you just want to have a place that you can come to, someplace to report to, where there's going to be a group of others drawing at the same time, grunting along or playing along at the same time, where you just kind of have that momentum, that kind of impetus to get you going? Because I think sometimes it's a little bit hard on our own to keep ourselves in the loop. And that's why I do these sketch sessions, keeping you drawing, because I think it's important that we do that. Okay, and with that, every week we have a different subject matter, and every week we have different lessons attached to that subject matter. We rotate from figure to portrait to animals, like today, and then the next one will be inanimate things. And tonight's lesson that is attached to our deers is talking about stylizing. How do we stylize our drawings? Why would we want to stylize our drawings? This is something that everybody should be doing. And so I will have 5 pointers for you to have in the back of your minds as you are working through your drawings and as you're trying to figure out, well, what style do I want to play with? And if that sounds good to you, let me encourage you to do 2 things. First of all, just let the information wash over you and maybe take even some notes. But then when we get into the drawing, you can watch for a little while, but I really encourage you to draw along. So as I said earlier, I design these sessions very strategically. They're not just like me just drawing randomly for an hour on one drawing. I show you brief reference images, and we usually go from like 1 to 2 minute images all the way up to 20 minute images. And like that, you are encouraged, not forced, encouraged to make quick decisions. And the more you do that, you get better, because the more you practice something, the more repetition you get and the better you get. And the reason why I have these lessons attached to the imagery is because if we want to grow as artists, we don't just want to repeat our habitual patterns of drawing. I mean, it's fun, but I think we all usually want to get better, right? And we only get better, though, by trying new things. And so by me kind of having these short reference poses for you to draw from encourages you to make quick decisions, trying out that new thing, failing fast, learning a lot, and hopefully through that becoming better and better and better. Okay, so let me present what I have prepared for you, and then we'll dive right in. So, and I hope I said it before, but I want you to draw along, because it's only through you drawing along that you'll get the most out of this session. All right, so let's talk about stylizing kind of with a broad scope, or from a broad scope. Why do we stylize? Why do artists stylize? And it's actually this rub that exists throughout the arc of art history between artists whose goal is to replicate real life as closely as possible, and artists who want nothing to do with that, but who want to evoke something more than what they're experiencing, or a heightened version of what they're experiencing. And that rub between these two impulses has existed since forever. But most poignantly, if you think back to the ancient Greeks and Romans, they really perfected naturalism in their sculptures in particular. And then we got the Middle Ages, and that's when everything changed and artists made a conscious choice. We don't want anything to do with that. We want really flattened, stylized imagery to make clear to whoever is looking at this is not real life. This is aspiring to a higher level, a more spiritual level. And then you got the Renaissance, and they're swinging back to the full-on realism and trying to bring that back to life. And even within the Renaissance, you then have outliers like Pontormo, who kind of elongates the figure again. And so you constantly have this push and pull. And like think back to the Expressionists, who were really interested in evoking a more emotional response through colors and distortions. So as I said, that is a dialogue in art that has happened for many, many years. And I think it's good for us to understand where we fall. Do we like to stay true to what we see in front of us? Or do we enjoy playing with stylizing things? Because here's the thing, I think stylizing is our chance to give our artwork our own signature. And I know this from a lot of the young art students I get at the university. They always are enamored with the idea of style and finding their own style. But you don't find your own style. It just doesn't just arrive. The way you get to your own style is by putting on a bunch of different styles. And then kind of eventually they all kind of become deposits in you, and you'll find yourself drawing from certain types of styles more often than from others. Okay, so let's get into the practical part of tonight. We begin with 2-minute poses. We'll ramp up to a last 20-minute pose. And as we're drawing, I want you to have the following 5 points in mind. When we stylize, what are we trying to do? We're trying to make it more than what it is, or we're trying to bring out a certain characteristic about the thing that we're looking at. And we can do this in many different ways. The key to me is always to begin with a really strong gesture, meaning what is the overall look of the thing you're drawing? Is it lumpy and heavy? Is it narrow and leaning? Is it arced over? So just begin by kind of squinting and zooming out and ask yourself, what's the overall look? And really focus on capturing that first. Then pause and ask yourself about this particular pose of the animal. What stands out about this pose? And what makes this pose characteristic? And then you try and pull that out more, and I'll show you later on how to do that. After you've kind of noticed what's particular about the pose, I want you to notice what is characteristic about this animal or person or thing that you're drawing. So a bear, if you compare a brown bear with a polar bear, they have different characteristic shapes. Like if you see the silhouette of a polar bear, it'll be recognizable as a polar bear. And if you put it next to a brown bear and you compare the two, you want to ask yourself, what makes this different from that? And if you can't contrast it with something, then just ask yourself, what, like for tonight, what looks especially deer-like about this image? And then you focus on that element. Once you've noticed those things, what's characteristic about the pose, what's characteristic about this deer, what's especially deer-like, then you want to think about the formal aspects of drawing. We've talked about this before, but if you're new and you're wondering what the heck is what the heck are the formal qualities of drawings? It's the following: line, shape, form. You can focus on value. You can focus on light and shadow, mark making. So those are all formal aspects. And I want you to think of them as levers. So if you have a pose in front of you and you notice what is characteristic about it, then you make a choice as you're drawing your gesture, which lever you want to pull and exaggerate. Like if you want to pull it, like let's let a little bit more of that into the drawing. And so if you want to pull the lever of line, you can do this in many different ways. You can decide to vary the line variation. You can decide to make curvier lines rather than very accurate lines. You can also pull the lever of shape, and you can make your drawing look much more two-dimensional and flat and kind of cancel out any three-dimensionality that you might see. Or you might ramp up the three-dimensionality and really make it round and lumpy looking. And if you want to pull the mark making lever, you can, for example, say, I'm going to just make scribbly lines and just create my drawing only with scribbly lines. Or you can say, no, I'm only going to organize my lines in one direction. And so like that, it will stylize your drawing. And I'm going to show you a few examples before we dive into the imagery, and then we'll go from there. So I hope that sounds good to you. Let me just switch my cameras over. This one here. Okay, so here you see various sketchbooks and our beginning deer. So this here, if I had to boil it down to how I stylized this drawing, it's still fairly realistic, but the way I stylize it is in how I organized my marks. So you can see how here I was being very organized with just one directional mark making. Now in this drawing, I'm going to get this closer to the camera. Let's see if I can focus this. You can see this is kind of a fantastical sketch where I'm combining lines and a little bit of form implication with this very flat silhouette of the tree foliage. So I'm stylizing, I mean, obviously I'm making something up from imagination, but I'm also kind of stylizing by playing up the lever of flat shapes. And here's the last one I have for you before we dive in. So here, this is what I mean by making a bunch of scribbly lines and using only scribbly lines to create your portrait or your drawing, whatever it is you're working on. Okay, so that gives you a little bit of a taste for what is possible, but of course, I'll talk a lot more as we're drawing. And so we're going to begin with 2 minutes, and I recommend you use your first couple of pictures just to warm up. So let me hit play here. Let me refocus. Okay. So in these first few images, don't worry about the stylizing part yet. Let's just warm up. Let's just kind of get used to holding a pencil in our hand and making marks and kind of unwinding from the rest of the day. And then after the first few, I'll talk you through different choices I'll be making to stylize what I'm seeing. So remember, one of my early points was to base your drawings on a strong gesture. So this gesture, it means the visual connection of the individual parts. So in this case, it creates this arc from this curved back down to the head into this outstretched head. And that is really what makes or breaks any drawing. Gesture, as you know, if you've been drawing with me for a while, is truly the bedrock. And as you are drawing this first gesture of the evening, you want to focus on your mark making, kind of lengthening your marks, becoming confident in your marks. And when I draw my gesture, I look for rhythms or dominant lines that I see in the pose. So I see a dominant line that goes from the neck to the chest, and then this opposing arc on the back here, and then I see the head leaning forward like that. So again, at this point, I'm not quite yet ready to think about stylizing anything. I'm really just warming up. But as I'm warming up, I want to talk a little bit about, you know, this idea of pulling on one of these formal levers. Like if you pull, let's say, on the shape lever to flatten your image out, kind of like the medieval artists did, how far can you go? And your answer is right in modern day cartoons. You can go really freaking far. So if you just think of like something like SpongeBob, or even something not quite as extreme like a Sleeping Beauty from Walt Disney, like if you look at the shapes that they're emphasizing, there is no what's the word I'm looking for? Like you can't push it too far. Like I'm thinking also of a show, or I think it was a movie, The Incredibles, where, you know, it's like I think the mother had like really long arms, and then the dad looked almost like a square himself, or like a rectangle. So cartoons are a really good place to see what stylization can look like if you take it really far. And then it can be, of course, much more mild. And the fun thing about playing around with this idea is, as you're trying these different styles on, you get to decide what fits for you and just what just isn't you. It's like, you know, going shopping and putting on an outfit that you're curious about, and then you put it on, you're like, oh, no thanks. Or you're totally feeling it, and it's like, oh yes, I've been waiting for this. Like, I didn't even know I wanted this, but here it is. And even in this gesture phase, I would claim that the most successful gestures let go of this idea that there is a correct line, a line that's the right line, quote unquote, the perfect line. And instead, it's a gesture that leans into simplification and distillation, like distilling the subject into the simplest possible linear version. So this is the last 2-minute pose, and then we'll actually try our hand at stylizing some of this. Here we got this big swoop from the neck into the body. especially as we get into the longer poses later on. Another thing you want to kind of be conscious of is that you need to make pausing and zooming out to see the big picture of what's happening on your drawing pad. You need to make that part of your drawing. You get so caught up in just making a mark, and kind of hustling to get it all done, and rushing to fit everything in, that we forget about steering the drawing. And if you don't make pausing and deciding where to go next with your drawing part of your drawing process, you always feel like you're just getting dragged along and you're at the mercy of your drawing. And that's just not a pleasant feeling. Oh, missed the horns. Okay, so this is our first 5 minutes. And I'm gonna make an attempt. I'm just gonna say this. I didn't make a plan ahead of time, so this might crash and burn, or it might work out. I'm gonna make a plan to focus on stylizing lines. But I don't do that. I'm not the kind of artist to do that just off the bat. I always like having a little bit of some guardrails to hang on to before I commit 100%. And I might be surprised by how quick 5 minutes are and might not get too much of it. But at least I'm setting an intention. So I'm noticing, okay, this pose has like this arc back at the back of the head. Then it has the swoop in the front, comes down, and we have the shoulders. Okay. Erase just a little bit the underlying stuff. And so here's the thing. I'm just gonna go for it. It's really uncomfortable for me to do this. I want to show you what it's like to lean into something and maybe crash and burn, and maybe also not. But see, I'm just gonna go for just some really direct contouring, and as I see fit, I'll try and either accent my line or thin it out. Or maybe pull it a little bit longer than I want it to. Let me get a different pencil. And as I said, I'm very uncomfortable right now. Like, this is not fun for me, especially not in front of others, because when you do this, as I said, you're very likely to just fall on your nose and just lose track of your proportions. And but again, the point is to practice something different, something that you usually don't practice, and see what you can learn from it. This is my motto at Cura Studios, is that art is a practice, not a performance. And you only get better. You can only perform better if that's your goal, if you practice a ton. And when you practice, you take off the pressure of needing it to be frame-worthy, gallery-worthy, saleable. Saleable? Not quite sure. And so this is what we do here together. We try out new things. We might fail together, we might succeed together, and it's private. You don't have to share your sketchbook, your practice pages with anybody. And then at the end of the session, even if not a single drawing turned out good, you pat yourself on the shoulder and say, awesome job. You worked hard, you took a beating, or you turned up with something really unexpected. And you basically become your own cheerleader rather than being the jerk who just, makes it really difficult for you to come back to the next drawing session. So, earlier I said you want to think about, well, what makes this deer-like, what makes this pose particular? So those 2 points. So for me, what was particular was this arc of the neck, this leg sticking out. Those are pose particularities. So I really wanted to focus on that. And the other particularities to me were the bumpy big knees. So that's something I'm pulling out more so than I would if I was trying to stay true to life. Okay, next one. This is 8 minutes. I think the time indications might be off screen for you guys. So it's 8 minutes. So let me look before I dive into the drawing. Let me make a plan. So what stands out about this is the gigantic ears. So let me focus on shape on this one and that bent leg. So it might be a, yeah, let's see what I can do with shape. And I'm going to stick with graphite for now. Okay, so let's go with my gesture. Just want to make sure I get the right scale. So it's on screen for you. And so here, once I get to the fleshing out of the shapes, I'll make a conscious attempt to really make those ears larger. So when I say you pull one of those levers in relationship to shape, that can look like making certain shapes look more than themselves. Like let's say you feel like a pose has a rectangular overall shape, you can force that. Or the other way of stylizing shape would be to enlarge certain shapes and keep others smaller. So this is what the artists in the Middle Ages did a lot. They did a lot of enlarging of random, not random, but like of particular areas. Like they would make the head honcho in the painting really big. Usually that would be like, the priest or the Jesus figure, or the most important figure of the piece they were creating. And then all the small folk, they were really small, like literally painted very small. And so you can do that for individual figures in your drawing, or you can do this with individual parts inside of your drawing. Like right now, I'm really going to focus on enlarging these ears. Doing that more so than I ever would, and see where that leads me. And so as you play around with this, you'll notice if this is like really hard for you to do, like if there's something inside of you that's just like, no, don't make it big. Or if it's really natural to you, that's something to pay attention to. It's nothing to judge as good as or bad, but it's something to become aware of, like, oh my God, this is like really fun and easy, and I've never done it before and why didn't I? Or it could be like, oh, this is really hard and I'm grinding my teeth as I'm doing this, but there's some cool things happening. I'm not going to do it every time, but you know, so you see what I mean? Like it's, you're testing how this fits. Okay, so see, I made this ear really large. I'm gonna try and stretch this neck out thinner than I see it. So I'm not sure if you've seen these drawings. I don't even know who did them. Might have been Dürer, where he takes people and he makes them into fruit. I think they're portraits. And some guys end up with pear heads, other end up with apple heads. So that's where he'd be forcing or kind of nudging or whatever you want to say, his subject into a heightened, exaggerated version, which is what people do when they do caricatures. So I've never studied how to create caricatures, but that's still the principle that these artists are operating on. And so again, why bother stylizing? Because it forces you to make choices. And your choices put your point of view into your artwork. If you just stay faithful exactly to what you see and you copied one-to-one, you have all the facts. But you know, we rarely feel inspired by or engaged with just mere facts. We're usually more drawn into by somebody's style, by somebody's choice of words. Like if we're going with stories, we're drawn in by the narrative. But again, facts alone usually don't convince us much. So here I'm trying to make these shapes longer than I see them. So another artist who played with stylization in a period when it wasn't all the rave was El Greco. So that Spanish painter, if you look at his paintings, the figures are very stretched out and stylized. So when you get to these areas that are characteristic for the animal, you can make those accentuated, or you can accentuate those. Maybe a bit too much right here. And I'm cleaning up as I go because it then shows me the overall. Okay, so this one, I'm gonna try, this one we have another 8 minutes for. I'm gonna try this one in the scribble technique that I mentioned. So now I'm gonna switch away from lines and from shape, and I'm gonna see if I can switch into mark making. I'm gonna try with this. I'm gonna use a Prismacolor. Okay, so first I'm gonna lay in my sketch, my gesture. See what's the overall. I'm gonna actually already switch gears and already in my gesture. See how I was habitually going for these longer, swoopier lines? I'm gonna change that right away. I'm gonna basically search out what's happening in these kind of arbitrarily squiggly lines. And I'm doing that by kind of holding my pencil also further back. Gives me a little bit less control. So if this whole stylizing business is really hard for you and you're just like, you know, don't even want to give an inch to chance and you just want to stay in that kind of copying mode, switching into your non-dominant hand might be a really good way to get you started, because you'll make mistakes and you want to make mistakes right now, because then you can rectify those mistakes by thinking about, okay, does this force me now to elongate something? Does this force me now to make the shape more so than I see it? So this is actually perfect because I have this Prismacolor pencil and a pencil extender. And the extender, it's not very good. It's kind of wobbly. I feel like the metal ferrule is gonna pop off any minute. So it kind of forces me into this scribbling line. That's the word I was looking for, scribbling, not squibbly. And so that's good for carrying out my intention. So drawing, staying or maintaining the feeling like you're directing your drawing has everything to do with having a clear intention for your drawing. And I don't mean like a woo-woo kind of intention, like I'm setting an intention for it to be good. I mean like an intention as to like what is your goal for the drawing. So do you want to focus on color? Do you want to focus on proportion? That's what I mean when I say intention. And so in order to get that taste of like feeling like you're in charge, like you might not control everything what's happening on the page, but you're at least in charge. Like you can redirect, and you can only redirect if you know what you want to redirect to, you know? Oh, I remember. So for this one, what I thought for this reindeer, what I thought was really characteristic were like those kind of broader feet, the broader hoof areas. It's like, it has like a triangular feel. So that's something I wanted to make sure to put in. So I'm a big fan of the scribbly sketching, just because if you make these kind of purposeful mistakes, then again, it forces you to counter steer. And usually when you make those counter steering marks, they're made very forcefully. They're made like you mean. It's like, no, that's not what I meant. Like I mean this way. And anytime you put that strength or conviction into a mark, it usually adds more interest. It's, you know, timid drawings, they're really uninteresting. And I don't mean subtle drawings. Subtle drawings can be super interesting because they were done on purpose to be subtle and gently rendered. But if something is timid, doesn't hold your attention for very long. Okay, so at this point, I'm gonna ask myself, do I want to bring attention to the butt or do I want to bring attention to the face? I'm gonna come back to the face because I like the eyes. I hope I have another minute or so left on this. Again, I'm remembering, see how my hand crept up to the tip? I wanted to control it. I'm not letting myself do that. See, now I made that little fuck up here, but that's fine. I'm gonna see where that leads me. So I was leaning onto that contour harder because I wanted to bring attention to the front of the head. But again, I did it in a way where I'm still kind of have an out of control mark. I kind of like this roundness of the nose. It's actually not so much round, but like more angular. That's what I meant to say. Okay, cool. Now I'm bringing some accents onto the tail. So notice I'm mainly hanging on to contours, imagined lines. I haven't done anything in terms of value. I'm not pulling that lever at all. Like as in, you see how there's the darker fur, and then on the butt left and right of the tail, there's the more white, the lighter fur. So I haven't played with that at all yet. And I don't even have time for it, so. Okay, oh, I remember. So this one, I prepared some color. So I wanted to, so if you have some colored pencil, you're welcome to do this along with me. But you see how the way the photographer took this picture, how reddish the legs look. So I'm gonna pull that lever. So I'm gonna stylize with color. So, but first, I'm gonna get my foundation. So I demonstrated an attempt to stylize my lines by varying line weight. Then I demonstrated an attempt to stylize based on shape. Then stylize based on mark making. And right now I'm gonna see if I can stylize based on color and whatever else seems interesting. So coming back to my guiding questions, what's particular about this pose? I find this kind of X-like leg position characteristic. I find that sway of the neck characteristic and the big ears. And the big ears and the black nose, those are also characteristic of it being a deer rather than a cow, let's say. Because a cow could stand like this. I'm gonna lean into this neck position. Okay. I don't get too many black marks on the feet because I have a vision. I know, and we have 10 minutes for this, by the way. I know what I want it to look like. So again, get away from feeling frustrated with your drawings, from feeling at the mercy of your drawings, never feeling like you don't even know like if you're getting anywhere with your drawings. It's because you need to know what you're aspiring to. And so, you know, I just said like I have a vision for what I wanted to do with this one. Like if you can kind of hold in your head what it is that you want to see, then you have something to aim at. And especially if you're just starting out with drawing or you're not feeling very confident about your drawing, I recommend, like, let's say if you're drawing animals, have an artist example, like a book about an artist who draws animals next to you as you draw. So if you can't hold the image in your head yet, have somebody else's image next to you and see, okay, I like how they're doing that, so let me see how they get there. Okay, so let's pull that color lever. So you see, I didn't just make everything red. I wanted to make a contrast between, and I can't tell if I'm in focus or not. Sorry about that. I wanted to contrast the crazy red legs with the rest. And I don't know if it's going to work out. Again, I love to see drawing more as an exploration, a treasure hunt where you don't know if you're going to find the treasure, instead of, I don't know, a trip to work. Where you know exactly how long it's going to take and which stop to get off at. Okay. Then I'm going to bring a little bit of color up here too. So if you're on Instagram, I posted a story. I don't know if it's still up or not. It's probably gone by now, but it was a story. You can put your answer in the comments. I posted a story on Instagram asking if you're into the look of medieval artwork, like if that's like, if the weirdness of that, if that's something that you find interesting or if it's just too funky for you. And I was very pleased to see that most people opted for the, yeah, give me all the weirdness instead of the, nah, it's too funky for me. And if you really don't like it, I don't judge you at all. I used to really not see the appeal of it myself, and then I kind of got into it a couple of years ago. There is and I don't know if he's an artist himself, but there's this Instagram account by Damien Kempf, and he has this feed of just like monsters or like fantastical creatures of the Middle Ages, and it's just priceless. It's the weirdness that they came up with, and in the way they came up with it, it's just, it's too good. So if you ever feel like the Middle Ages were boring and dreary, like not those monks who were making those illuminated manuscripts, they had something that was going on that kept them really, really tapped into the imaginative realm. And maybe if you don't know many of the illuminated manuscripts, another person who did that, who is a bit more well known, is Hieronymus Bosch. So he did these paintings, like the Garden of Earthly Delights or something like that. It's like all the monsters punishing people for misbehaving. It's quite something. wonder what that white thing is. I wonder if that's just a snowflake here. I don't think that's part of the deer. Yes, Ted, you're onto something. I know, I'm from Germany, and beer is a food group there, and we are actually right now in Lent, right? So Lent is fasting period, and the way the monks got through Lent was with beer, and a lot of these breweries in Bavaria, where I'm from, they're monk or monastery owned breweries. Although, personally, drawing drunk doesn't really make for good drawings for me. So this is something I haven't said in a while in the last few minutes, so I'm going to remind you. As you're doing these studies, these practices on how to stylize your drawing, make pausing, leaning back, and zooming out part of your process. Yeah, maybe if I practiced that, maybe I would get better at it. So what I wanted to do with this one, I wanted to kind of combine the blackness of the ears, the blackness of the nose, and then kind of let that connect with the redness of the legs. I'm definitely nowhere near where I wanted that to be. So maybe after we're done here, I'll jump back into that one, because I had such high hopes for this one and didn't quite come where I want it to be. Okay, this here is a 20-minute one. So I don't even know if we'll have enough to draw for 20 minutes, but I wanted to focus on form with that one. Let me see if I need to reposition that a little bit. Give me just a sec. Let's place it like this. I think that's good. This way. Alrighty, so, and what pencil do I want to use? I'm just gonna go for this one here. Okay, so the last demonstration, I wanted to focus on form. Stylizing on form. And I'm not quite sure yet how I'm going to do it with this, so I'm just beginning my drawing lightly, kind of as I'm making my first marks, just kind of thinking about oh, I see. Okay, I think I know what I want to do. So you see when I look at the snout, I really get a sense for this is like a barrel, and I want to see if I can pull that forward and then make the muzzle part kind of bulgy feeling. So that's my intention. Again, it might totally not work, but it might. So see, I'm enlarging it, and then later on, the way I'll put my shading over it, I'll really focus on making it feel 3D, and maybe you can give it some really bulgy eyes. So it's gonna look funny. I'm not gonna try and make it so this is a very regal stag, right? I don't think when I'm done with him, he's gonna look regal anymore. No ill will against the lovely stag. So see, I'm not locking these eyes in yet. They're still pretty faint. I might want to make them even bigger. So the eye sockets here, that bone area, I'm probably gonna make that bumpier. I really see it. If you want to look at some really great artists who stylize based on line, I know I'm not talking about line right now, but they just came to mind for some reason. Like if you want to see how you can stylize with line weight variation, I highly recommend you look at Jaw Cooper, so Jaw Cooper, and Claire Wendling. I mentioned her before. So those are two. They kind of have a similar style. I particularly enjoy how they stylize with their line work. But yeah, just become, if nothing else, like if you decide, you know what, you don't have any interest in stylizing, and you don't want to practice that ever again in the future, that's totally fair. But I still want to encourage you to become conscious of stylized drawings around you, especially if you have Disney Plus. You could just throw on any of their movies and notice how their styles have changed, because every movie has a slightly different style key, like the thing that makes all the imagery inside of that movie feel consistent. Like you'll see a frame from Sleeping Beauty and it will not look like a frame from what's the other one, Snow White. And then if you look at the more modern ones, the more current ones, if you look at Moana, and then compare that to, gosh, now I can't think of another one. I don't watch very many Disney movies. But like another animated movie that comes to mind is Book of Kells. I don't know if Disney did that one. I don't think so. But like if you compare that, you know, totally different language, visual language, and that is stylization. And again, it doesn't have to be animation based. It can be from the old masters. Look at a Pontormo, look at an El Greco, and then compare them to Jacques-Louis David. And even David was stylizing. It's just different. So I find it fascinating, like what different periods, what different artists chose to pull, what to focus on. God, I'm loving that snout. Hope I don't mess it up. You never know. Okay, so quick review. How, this is not a review from today, but from previous sessions. To make something feel three-dimensional, you want to indicate plane changes. So what's a plane change? Let me just pull something up here. Okay, you see, so I drew this little, I don't know if it's a stump or something. So you have a cylinder, and on that cylinder you have a branch coming out. So a plane change, a very clear plane change would be happening right here. So you're going from this way to this way. And then you have another clear plane change right here, because again, this is where your direction changes. From here to here to here to here. So even this edge is a super clear plane change where your direction goes from here to here. And what I mean by direction, it's the surface orientation. So you need plane changes, plane changes, plane changes, and across contours. Contours that mimic what's going across the form. So those are the kind of marks you'll see me really play up. And Sorab, I just saw your comment. I don't know any of them. I can't see the one over here. My chat, like it gets cropped off, so I see the first one and then the last one, but I don't know any of those two. But I'll definitely look those up when we're done. Thanks for posting them. Okay, let's see. So, and even with how you apply the texture, I think we did a session on texture, right? That will stylize your drawing as well. So any shading that I'm making on this one, rather than shading it flat, so shading flat is shading in one direction or shading with the side of your pencil in one direction. Rather than shading flat, I'm going to shade in a cross contour way. I'm going to make it bulgier and bumpier than I see it. And so of course, you know, when I give you these lessons, I really simplify things and artificially pull them apart. Of course, you can combine these levers. So, you know, you might choose to combine stylizing your form as well as stylizing your shapes. Like they're tied together. They're really hard to separate out. It's only when you make like a complete choice to flatten out your drawing 100% and even like get rid of any depth indications where you can separate them out. But especially once you focus on form, you're kind of automatically also focusing on shape. Okay, I'm gonna pull my attention. See, I was starting to have fun with this ear over here, but I want to make sure that I stay on task. My goal was to get that muzzle to feel really three-dimensional, so I'm gonna get back to that. I'm gonna sharpen my pencil with my sharpener. It's gonna get loud. And when you're creating your cross contour marks and you're not quite sure how to organize your marks when you go cross contour, the best way is to think in terms of planes. So if you think of the nose as this boxy thing, and it's not a hard-edged box, it's a rounded box, you want to organize your marks with the edges of the facets of this box, right? So you can choose to go multiple ways. You can go this way, and you can go this way too, and there's no right or wrong. You just kind of let your gut lead you on that. So you're angling your pencil with the facet of the surface that you're drawing right now. And we did, I think it was a portrait sketch session before where I talked about this. Oh, you know what? Actually, it was where I talk about cross contour in depth. We did a session on root vegetables. And actually, that one has one of the most views of all the sketch sessions, which was surprising to me. But yeah, it's a useful skill, kind of an essential skill to me to understand cross contouring. So as we were drawing, as you were hopefully drawing too, and even if you see this after the fact, you can still put this in the comments. What kind of questions have come up for you? Let me know if anything is unclear, or if I said something and you didn't either hear it right or I didn't say it in a way where it clicked with you. Just please put any questions in the chat. I'll address those before we hop off. So I said it earlier, but I want to repeat it. This way of drawing, like stylizing, is not something that's natural to me. And I'm saying it because I want you to know that even though I consider myself a professional artist who can perform at a pretty high level, I practice things I am not comfortable with because I want to get even better. And if that means that I have to do some clunky, awkward drawings in front of you guys, then if that gives you permission to do more of that too, I feel like I've accomplished my mission. I feel like we all need to draw as much as we can because it's such a good way to stay balanced and happy. And there are so many things we do to keep ourselves from drawing more, and I want to make sure that everybody draws who wants to draw and who gives themselves permission to fumble. So how can you apply form even more aside from cross-hatching and emphasizing plane changes, emphasizing overlaps, being really clear about this form is in front of this form, like the nose is overlapping that lip and this part of the lip is overlapping this back part of the lip. Again, even if I am attempting to just darken something, I'm asking myself, do I have a chance, rather than just making my marks in a straight way, can I darken this area by a cross contouring? And one last thing I'll do, I don't know how much time I've left on this one. I'm gonna play a contrast now. So you see how I worked so much on cross contouring here and building that form. I'm gonna play that now against the flatness of the shadow underneath. And I'm not sure if it's gonna work out. But sometimes you need a counterpoint for your point to really land. Well, let me just finish this though. I can knock this out real quick. All right. So yeah, I think that helped. I think especially if I go back into it and make this a little bit darker and flatter, I think it'll really help in bringing that nose out. All right, let me switch over cameras real quick. Well, there you have it. This is how you stylize when you're drawing, and this is how you stylize in an intentional way. And I hope you had some insights as you were practicing along. And just to kind of bring this to a conclusion, let me remind you of the points you want to have in your mind as you're stylizing. So you can stylize in order to exaggerate certain elements of the thing you're looking at. So I would ask myself, what's the overall gesture first? Like just the body position. And even if you're going to go for a contour-based stylization, put that contour in lightly, just as your guardrails. Then second, ask yourself, if you're just looking at your reference, what is characteristic about the pose? Like, you know, if there's like a turn, like become consciously aware of the turn. If there is something sticking out really far, like become consciously aware of that thing that makes this pose very particular. The third thing is, if you're drawing an animal or a person or even just a random object, ask yourself, what is characteristic of that animal? What makes a cow characteristically a cow as opposed to a horse, as opposed to a deer, as opposed to a polar bear? And in this pose, what can I exaggerate, accent, colorize to bring those characteristics out? And again, when you're stylizing, you have these levers that you can pull. You can pull your contour lever. You can play with making a continuous contour, even though that will flatten your drawing out. You can play with pushing the thickness and the thinness of your contours. You can, rather than thinking about lines, you can think about shape. You can force your deer to look like a balloon, or individual parts. You can take individual shapes like the ears and enlarge them, make them more pointy. So you can make them more like a certain shape, or you can exaggerate what they already look like. You can exaggerate the form. You can exaggerate the shadows, like the contrast you see between light and shadow. You can minimize the contrast between light and shadow. Those are all stylistic choices. And then the last one was mark making. You can have scribbly marks, you can have long fluid marks, you can have jagged marks. That is all your choice. And lastly, I said it a couple of times, make pausing and assessing part of your drawing experience. Rather than just mark making, pause, lean back, zoom out, and assess, is this heading where I wanted to go? Is this working? And then make adjustments based on that. So I hope you like this. Tag me on Instagram if you're posting anything. I want to see it. I want to give you a virtual high five. I want to cheer you on for practicing along. And I'm at Kira Studios there. I hope you're on my email list, because that's where I tell really fun stories that will keep you creating more and have more fun while you're creating. And there are 2 links below the videos where you can sign up for those. You'll get 2 goodies depending on which link you opt for. And lastly, next week we'll be back with inanimate things, and I have a strong inkling that it'll be drapery. So I'm going to do some classical drapery studies on like different types of folds that exist. But if you have other ideas, let me know of those other ideas and I'll consider them. And yeah, thanks for hanging out. Hope to see you next time, and can't wait to see what your drawings were like tonight. Take care.